And welcome to the December 4th, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my sincere privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda that we'll be following tonight on both sides of the room. If you haven't already availed yourself of one, please pick one up and follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as an opportunity for comments and questions of a general nature with respect to items that are not on our agenda. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point in time, I would like to ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here, we have a full house tonight. That brings us to item 3, minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of minutes from our November 20th, 2012 regular council meeting to review and approve. Are there any questions or comments, corrections or changes from any members of the council? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved. Zipping right along to item 4, public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where, as advertised, we entertain comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on our agenda tonight. So if anyone present has any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not on our agenda, I would invite you to please come down to the podium, give us your name and address, and we would welcome hearing from you. A couple of folks making their way down right now. Good evening.
Good evening. I've kind of got a cold, so I apologize if you...
Well, we're not going to take your questions until you're healthy, so go home. Please come back.
My name's Leanne Lally, and I live at 4117 Highland Avenue. And I just wanted to come up and say that I have sent each of you actually a couple pieces of email about the chicken coops. And I've owned chickens in the village now for 4 years with the agreement of my neighbors. It's actually gone very nicely and very peacefully. I came into it kind of by accident. I was hatching eggs as an experiment with my children, and I had this really harebrained idea, and quite frankly, since my husband isn't here, I guess I can admit this, I was really just teasing him that I had just decided we were going to keep these chickens, and yeah, just to see him freak out, and all of a sudden he starts sending me these websites, Backyard Chickens, and, you know, My Pet Chicken, and I thought, my gosh, he's actually coming around to this idea. So we kind of tripped into this chicken ownership, but the idea of the eggs really appealed to me, as you know, sustainability and all this green movement that's going on, and, you know, local farming. Everybody is a little bit more concerned about where their food's coming from. So that did play a part in it, but it's almost laughable how this ended up happening. And 4 years later, none of us owns a pair of overalls, so we're doing pretty good. And yeah, I just was really surprised getting into it, just that I enjoyed the experience so much. You know, you don't think of chickens quite as pets, but it's quite an experience that I've grown to love, and it surprises me. And, you know, the whole family really has enjoyed it. We've learned an awful lot, an interesting education from it. And it's surprising how much really like pets these birds really are. They're really not much different from owning a dog or a cat. I mean, a regular bird you might have would be in a cage. This one actually can roll about your yard, debug it, fertilize it, and feed you. So it's really kind of a win-win situation. And I'm just so grateful that you were here discussing the possibility of making this option available to more of our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your comments. Actually, I think we may be discussing whether we're going to discuss it, to be more pointed about it, but thank you. Other questions or comments? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Dawn Susan Conters of 5709 Hillcrest Road. We've been residents of the Hillcrest neighborhood for the past 16 years, and we also are here on behalf of the issue concerning the chicken discussion this evening. The current wording of the fowl ordinance in Downers Grove, although we do allow them, excludes most property owners, including ourselves, which we are on a fairly large lot, a 55 by 250-foot lot. And I just feel confident that chickens, they are currently allowed in Downers Grove. I think they could work for most residents and be an asset to the community as well. We have had a similar story to Leanne's. 5 years ago, we decided as an educational science project with our children to study embryology and hatch some eggs. And the chicks were really cute, and we thought we could, go ahead and raise them for eggs. We checked with neighbors. We wanted to make sure that we were considerate of our neighbors and their feelings on having chickens right next door to them. And we haven't had a complaint in the past 5 years against us with regards to noise or smell. In the spirit of full disclosure, we do have a complaint right now. Somebody, not a direct neighbor, but in our neighborhood, feels that the chickens are attracting wildlife. But I think if we are able to further investigate this, you will see that they don't attract any more wildlife than the rabbits that are already existent in our neighborhoods and the compost piles and the garbage that is just normal in a residential area. Our neighbors actually enjoy sending their children and grandchildren over to visit with our hens, and we enjoy their eggs and other benefits of chicken ownership. So I'm here to ask, I know this is up for a vote, to look further into possibly modifying the language of the current ordinance, and I hope that you'll consider voting yes tonight so that we could include more Downers Grove residents in the right to own chickens. And I would like to extend an invitation as well to come and tour our setup and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you for coming and thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on tonight's agenda? Good evening.
Hi. Ken Lerner, 4933 Whiffen Place. I'm here on behalf of the Pierce Downers Heritage Alliance to extend our invitation to the mayor and council to attend our annual meeting, which is going to be coming up in a week from tomorrow, Wednesday, December 12th, at the Lincoln Center at 7 p.m. And we will be featuring, our featured speaker this year will be Shannon Forsyth, who will talk about the educational programs that the Park District has at the Lyman Woods Interpretive Center, and the different programs that are available and the sort of driving educational philosophy behind those programs, which aim to introduce people to the wonderful world of nature and the wonderful piece of nature that we have on our doorstep in Lyman Woods. And so I hope to see all of you there, and I hope it will not diminish the invitation when I say that the public is also invited. In fact, everyone is welcome, and we will, and refreshments will be served. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Thank you for extending that invitation. Any other questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items of a general nature? Very well then, hearing none, we'll move on our agenda to item 5, public hearings, and we actually have a public hearing tonight. An important one has to do with the 2012 aggregate tax levy and abatements for the Village of Downers Grove. Therefore, I would like to call this public hearing to order. This public hearing has been called by the Village Council pursuant to the Illinois Truth in Taxation Law to consider the proposed 2012 tax levy of the Village of Downers Grove. Notice of this hearing was published in the Downers Grove Reporter, and a copy of the notice and the proof of publication have been presented and are made a part of the official record of this hearing. I would like to summarize the procedures which we will follow for tonight's public hearing. First, I will ask the village manager to summarize the proposed 2012 tax levies. Second, I will then ask if any member of the village council wishes to make a statement or ask a question. Third, there will then be an opportunity for members of the public to make statements or comments or to submit written statements or comments for the record. Fourth, I will then ask once again if any member of the village council wishes to make a statement, or ask a question. And fifth and finally, we will then adjourn the hearing. At this hearing, witnesses will not be sworn, and a verbatim written transcript of the statements or testimony given at the hearing will not be prepared. However, a recording of the procedures will be made on village equipment and retained until minutes of the hearing have been prepared and approved by the village council. So with that introduction, we will now move to the presentation by the village manager with respect to the proposed 2012 tax levies. Mr. Fieldman.
Well, it's a very short presentation. It's the same presentation we've been making since late September. The levy, as proposed, has not changed since the proposed budget was published in late September. The total levy for the village after abatements is just over $11 million, which is about $1.98 million less than last year, $1.98 million less than last year. There's a lot of information about the levy on our website under the budget message, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
All right, I think it's worth, thank you, and I think it's worth repeating that that's actually an extension of previous presentations that we've had here and on the website and in other media sources. So I will then ask if any members of the village council have any questions or comments with respect to the proposed 2012 tax levies. And once again, we have discussed this before, so don't take the silence or lack of questions to mean anything other than we are now at the formal part of the presentation where we have a formal public hearing on it, but the information has been previously presented and discussed by the council and the public. Moving right along then, are there any questions or comments from any members of the public with respect to the proposed 2012 tax levies? Anyone want us to go through what a levy is or an abatement one more time? It's not something that holds back water, that's for sure. All right, hearing no questions or comments from the public, are there any final questions or comments from the village council on this subject? I think Commissioner Waldeck's had some time to think about it. He has a question.
Well, just to ask the village manager, when did the budget process start?
The last week of September when the proposed budget and proposed levy were published.
Okay, and I wanted to get that out in public because the closer you get to passage of these things, the more write-ups and comments you hear, and I always encourage people to show up to our budget meetings and get involved, not just at the tail end, but when we start these things. So we are now at the tail end, so let us proceed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just find it interesting that I've seen more comments lately about the proposed increases in parking rates and water rates that we haven't even done yet, and very little about the $2 million reduction in property taxes. Just saying.
Can I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
I think there is a misconception as to really what's going on. I think people have gotten so involved in the stormwater utility and what it's going to cost and how much it's going to cost them, and that they really have not somehow focused on the fact that it's really a wash as far as the property taxes going down, but in fact it's better than a wash, but the property taxes are going down and the fees for stormwater are being spread across a larger group of people. But somehow, at least from what I've heard from some people who have asked questions, they don't seem to totally understand that process. And it is a learning process, and hopefully they will continue to learn as do we. And hopefully we can continue to get that information out there. But I think that's why people don't talk about the $2 million, because they're more concerned about the fact that there's other fees out there that are being pushed on them, and they don't quite understand what all that means.
Yes, and in fairness, folks are also not just looking at 2012 and
Right.
2013, but they're looking beyond and wondering where all this is going to go, and that's a fair question.
I understand that. So.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Final questions or comments from members of the council on the 2012 tax levy? All right, hearing none, then I will adjourn this public hearing. Thank you very much for the robust discussion. And we'll move on to item 6, which is our consent agenda. We have 4 items on our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the public with respect to the items on the consent agenda tonight? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The consent agenda is passed unanimously, which brings us to our active agenda, item 7, We have a number of items on our active agenda. The first item, 7A, do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing special service area number 4 in the Village of Downers Grove for the Green Acres subdivision as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience on this item? Questions or comments from members of the council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 7B as in boy. Do I have a motion to award a contract for $569,740.50 to NCAP Inc. of Sycamore, Illinois for the naturalization of the Valley View Pond?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? The Valley View Pond, naturalization. Hearing none. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience? I'm sorry, from any members of the village council? I'm trying to give you 2 tries. Commissioner Schnell.
Just a comment, and it's more, I think, to reassure the residents. We will continue to monitor, as will NCAP, the actual health of the plants that are being put in, and that it will not look like a swamp with a bunch of weeds in it, but it will actually look like a wetland that's thriving.
Right, we will continue to monitor both the Village of Downers Grove staff and the contractor. We will monitor for the maintenance and upkeep, and we will actually include the neighborhood in the design of the landscaping and materials to the extent allowed under the permit processes we'll go through. So we will be in constant contact during the design and construction and maintenance phase.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments from members of the council? I will just add that obviously the neighborhood views this as a very high priority and has been actively engaged in it. And there have been a lot of, I think, very fair questions about not just what will actually happen, how it will be done, which I understand that the neighborhood will be invited to participate in the design, but also going forward. What will be the plans for maintaining standards, continuing maintenance, and we don't know what those are yet. I would suggest, I don't know if my colleagues agree or not, that we single this out as an item that we plan to revisit at key points in the program so that the council can understand what it is that the neighborhood has heard, what has been designed, not only to hold the contractor accountable, but also to make sure that we're making good on our commitment that it will be maintained to the appropriate standards on a going forward basis, because I think that's a fair request and a fair concern by the neighborhood. So if that makes sense, perhaps that's something that we can ask staff to do, again, as appropriate. Right now, there's nothing more to be said, but I know there was a fair amount of angst about where is this going to be at 18, 24 months from now.
Sure, we will do so.
Thank you. It'd be greatly appreciated. Anything else from members of the council? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7C as in cat. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance which adopts the 2012 edition of the International Energy Conservation Code?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to kind of remind everybody one more time before we actually pass this that this is really a clerical thing at our end. This is a mandate from the state of Illinois that we're making. The motion that's actually happening tonight is to bring our code in compliance with a state mandate. This body certainly has not evaluated or discussed or debated the merits of the International Energy Conservation Code this time or the last time. And there are some real costs here. So I'd encourage everybody who is doing work or expecting to do work to their homes or properties in the future to make sure that they pay a lot of attention to what these new codes entail. And if they struggle with them, they should contact state legislators because it's one more thing pushed downhill from Springfield, so to speak. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnett. Well said. Anything further? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7D as in David. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance which will amend water rates for the year 2013 as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance amending water rates for 2013 as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments on proposed water rates from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments from members of the village council? Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. You know, I know that this is a lot to do with the pass-through from the city of Chicago, which is charging the DuPage Water Commission the rates that are then passed on to us to be charged to our residents, or I should say water users of the community as a whole. What I did, and I've been actively looking into this through the different organizations that I belong to with my daytime employer, I included and passed out a copy of an article that the Chicago Tribune had written back on Sunday, November 25th, and it talks about how some of the south suburban cities of Chicago, the south suburbs of Chicago, are actually looking to put their own water system through, going through Hammond, Indiana. And I share that with all of you. I know that not being a lawyer, I don't understand how all of it works, but you know, we're contracted to go through the DuPage Water Commission. I know that would be costly to do for one community, but with what I consider the rates that are just, you know, there's like no common sense on these rates and how they've been constructed through the city of Chicago being passed on to us. There's got to be something that we could look at, some kind of legal challenge or something, because, you know, water is liquid gold, and without water we don't survive. And eventually, you know, no matter how much you save on your water from watering or taking baths or showers or laundry, you're going to need it. And I just pass this out as more information than anything, just so we know as a council and even staff, if nobody's seen it, what others are doing to address this issue that's not only impacting Downers Grove, but everybody who goes through the city of Chicago for water.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from the council? I think it's worth repeating once again that as Commissioner Durkin indicated, we are by large part sort of stuck with what is presented to us when it comes to water rates. The village has been responsible in looking proactively to the future and figuring out what our infrastructure needs are for bringing water from the DuPage County Water Commission, where we receive it, and actually distributing it to our residents. And obviously there's a fair amount of expensive infrastructure involved in that. And so we look at what those long-range costs are going to be and make sure that our water rates not only include the cost of water that we have to purchase in order to resell to residents, but that we include in those rates monies that can then be set aside for important infrastructure projects like the water tank that's being repainted over on Maple Avenue. Everyone can see that. And there are also water mains that have to go in. There's a lot of equipment involved in distributing water and maintaining water quality. And we have to make sure that we are bringing in revenue that will pay for those capital improvements, not just for today, but for the next 15, 20, and so on years. And the water rate study that the village did looked at those infrastructure needs in the long term and factored that into what the water rates ought to be. But a critical component of all that, of course, is what is the DuPage County Water Commission charging municipalities like Downers Grove for the water that we purchase. And that figure is, as Commissioner Durkin mentioned, is driven primarily by the cost that the DuPage County Water Commission has to pay to get that water from the city of Chicago, because guess what? They actually have the cribs that are out in Lake Michigan that bring it inland. And kind of a monopoly. Not much you can do about it unless you're planning on digging a trench out to Lake Michigan, and that might be a little difficult in this day and age. That said, obviously the kind of increases, including Chicago's second double-digit water rate increase, which candidly I think was designed as much to improve some of their own problems as it was anything else, is coming to hit us pretty hard out here. And yet the question is, well, where else are you going to get your water from unless we're all going to start digging wells again? And that isn't necessarily a very viable option for a number of reasons. There are a number of municipalities and conferences of governments, as Commissioner Durkin has mentioned, that are looking at, are there any realistic alternatives to going through the city of Chicago for water? And at a minimum, I think that's worth doing because it would help at least spur a little bit more realism, competition, whatever you want to call it, in terms of water rates. But there very well may be viable alternatives. And I just want everyone to know that while we sort of don't have much choice with respect to passing on these water rates, we are going to vigorously explore other opportunities to the extent that we can, and we'll see where that goes, because I don't think we can keep, pardon the pun, swallowing and drowning in these increased rates all the time. So, end of speech. Commissioner Rankin.
When I was attending the DuPage Mayor and Managers Intergovernmental meeting, they were talking about an initiative to kind of hold the city of Chicago accountable, but I haven't attended in a while because we have new membership there. Has that gone anywhere?
There was an effort, and Manager Fieldman probably has more details on it, that was explored by a number of organizations, but shall we say it's complicated. And there may be initiatives that one can pursue, but one has to weigh the likelihood of success and the other consequences as to whether or not it's going to be effective. But yes, there were a number of efforts like that that were explored. One in the shape and form that I think you recall was not ultimately pursued. There was a request, okay, it was a demand by the DuPage County Water Commission and the chairman, James Zay, to have the city of Chicago actually provide an accountability report that would show, okay, you told us you needed all this additional money for infrastructure. Please show us after 6, 9, 12 months where those dollars went to actually improve the infrastructure that helped to transmit the water out to DuPage. And I think most of us probably caught it at one point in time, but when Chairman Zay received the report, he thought it was anything but an accountability report, and was actually very critical of it, and that it did not reflect, in his opinion, and in the DuPage County Water Commission's opinion, that the dollars were being used in the way that everyone was told they were going to be used. And again, I'm not suggesting any untoward or foul play by anyone, but the report was not up to snuff. And that's sort of where things are at. And yes, there are ongoing conversations about how do we do something about that. And importantly, this is one of those issues where many voices have a lot more pull than one. So the extent that we can not only work with other municipalities in DuPage, but actually conferences of governments or COGs throughout the entire Chicago metropolitan area can band together. The more voices we have on this, the better. And Manager Fieldman probably has more information if I haven't exhausted it.
I believe you have exhausted it, Mayor. Thank you.
Correct. Any other questions or comments?
You don't want to hear any more from me.
I always want to hear more from you.
No. I'll say
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say. So
the
right.
annual's office calling me tomorrow.
Yeah, well,
I welcome it.
if he does, you can forward the call.
I will.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter passes unanimously. And that brings us to item 7E. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending parking permit fees as presented?
Mayor Tully, I'd move to table the ordinance amending certain parking permit fees until next week's meeting.
I have a motion to table item E, an ordinance to amend parking permit fees to a date certain, which would be next Tuesday. Is there a
Second. Second.
Any questions or comments, any members of the audience? Any questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Barnett, you want to elaborate?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is something we've been looking at now, beginning prior to Thanksgiving and up through some additional information yesterday, and I have an alternate proposal, if you will, that I'd like an opportunity to circulate amongst my colleagues and our staff for consideration, and between now and next week, we can digest that and decide if it merits further thought, or we can just move forward like this, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. I second that because I've, for a long time, been interested in amending our parking permit fees and trying to make them fair and appropriate. I still point out that it's cheaper to park all day than it is to ride a Ferris wheel at the fest. So it needs some looking over, and I'm happy to second Commissioner Barnett's motion. Thanks.
Commissioner Schnell, thank you.
Just, I think so that there are communities out there are not somehow panicking that, I think it's more looking at least from my perspective, would be more looking at non-resident rates and the fairness and equity to our residents, and hopefully that's where it's going. So that all of a sudden people who are residents are not panicking that their rates may go up another 150% or something. So that's not at least what I'm anticipating happening. So we'll know. I mean, good. People can dream and think, so just so they understand where we may be going.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just add that I welcome the suggestion by Commissioner Barnett to table this until next week, because I also had some similar concerns about the disparity in the increases between resident and non-resident fees, and want to explore some other options that may be available to us. I realize that the matters are complicated because of third parties who are involved in this that we do not control. It sounds like a familiar theme. But I think there are some creative things that we can do, so I look forward to whatever Commissioner Barnett or anyone else may have to propose on this, because I think we can and should do something a little bit differently. But to Commissioner Schnell's point, I don't think anyone's going to suggest that we're doubling things or anything.
No,
like
but,
that.
people
Non-residents.
could be concerned about that, so I think we need to at least clear the air.
But we do want the non-residents to come in and shop in Downers Grove. At any rate, that's the motion that's on the table to table this until a date certain, which would be next Tuesday. And with no further comments, roll call, please.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the matter is tabled until next Tuesday. That brings us to the end of our active agenda, brings us to item 8, which is our first reading or our workshop segment of our meeting, when we present items for discussion purposes only, and discussion, questions, and for potential action at a later point in time. It's customary to turn over this part of the meeting for presentation to village staff, so I will let Village Manager Fieldman lead the charge.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 4 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an approval of an agreement for the Rotary Grove Fest. And here to present information on this item is our Community Development Director, Tom Dabereiner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Resolution has been prepared authorizing the village to enter into a 3-year agreement with the Rotary Club of Downers Grove to hold a festival in downtown Downers Grove on June 20th through the 23rd this year, or excuse me, in 2013. I jumped ahead for a moment. And then similar dates, 2014, 2015. We're looking for approval on December 11th. This will remind a lot of people about what Grove Fest has to offer, and really there's just a couple of new things about this. Usually we do a 1-year contract. This year it's a 3-year contract, and it's possible that there will be a second stage added. Not for sure yet. Focus on children's presentations, daytime stage. Everything else pretty much the same. So why is this happening? Well, it provides Rotary with the opportunity to negotiate multi-year contracts for vendors and others, and that helps to provide lower costs for Rotary and more efficiency for the event itself. The village, as a reminder, does not lose any control over the process, and costs continue to be covered by Rotary. Any changes to the program will be brought back to council if it's deemed outside the scope at all or a significant change. So it's quite possible you could see this again in the near future. Otherwise, this will be a 3-year contract that gets renewed. This, as a reminder, is the area that you'll all recall as the home of Grove Fest, with the Craft Fair at Official Park just off the map, and the Sunday car show there. Got the vendor area on Main Street, the ride area running east-west along the north, entertainment area and beer garden, kids rides, the potential second stage here. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Staff recommends approval of the 3-year contract.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dabereiner. Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to Rotary Grove Fest? Good evening, Mr. Humphreys.
Hi there.
We're going to have that pillar removed.
This will be real brief because it's kind of a same as presentation, but Dave Humphreys, 4221 Saratoga. I'm here as a member of the Community Events Commission, which is chaired by Commissioner Rankin. This proposal was presented to the Community Events Commission and was, I must say, rather enthusiastically approved by the Commission. As part of full disclosure, I should say that I am a member of the Rotary Club. I just wanted to point out that this will be the 32nd year that we have had a community festival in downtown Downers Grove. That's 28 years of Heritage Festival produced and presented by the Village of Downers Grove, and this will be the 4th year for Rotary Grove Fest. I'm proud to be a part of a community that can have a run like this, and it's an exciting, fun, true community event. And as a community event, I mean, it should be pointed out that there is no paid staff on the part of the Rotary Grove Fest. It is operated not only by the Rotary Club, but by more than 300 volunteers from the community who assist and help run and participate in this. So there is true ownership by the community in this event. And then all net revenues from the festival are returned to the community in the form of scholarships and charitable grants to community organizations. So it's an exciting event. Those of you who know me for a long time, I've worked on festivals in this community for a long time. There's nothing that I personally enjoy more than watching lots and lots of people out on the street with big smiles on their faces, listening to good entertainment with food in both hands. So it's a great event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Humphries. Any other questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the proposal with respect to Downers Grove Rotary Grove Fest? Hearing no more comments from the audience, questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to see this come forward for a 3-year agreement. I think that'll help the Rotary Club and continue the investment in this event. One of the things that Tom showed was the possibility of a second stage on the north end. We often hear, and through my participation at Downtown Management, the north side of the tracks having more attractions, more activity, more for the businesses and the owners down there. That's something that I've just heard recently, that anything you could do to have some extra stuff over on the north side stage would be awesome. But that would be appreciated, I'm sure, by that segment of our downtown. But I'm in full support of this. There's some changes to some hours and other things that look like they were agreed upon by not only the Rotary but also the village staff, and looks like a great deal. So thank you everybody for your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
I'd also like to point out that this agreement still allows for staff and the council to review it every year if there's changes. So it's not ironclad, but it's just for the Rotary to get good pricing, and I imagine save them time to have to negotiate their agreements every year. So I think it's a great addition to the event.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank the Rotary Club for continuing this in our community. I'm glad to see that staff has recommended modifying the agreement for a duration of the 3-year period. And really the reason is savings from multi-year contracts. So with that said, is there a possibility if the whole purpose of a 3-year contract or agreement is to save money and allow them more money to give back to the community, to reduce that letter of credit from 120% possibly down to 105%? Because letter of credits do cost money. They have to apply for them through the banks unless they're going to give you a CD and pledge that. So if we could look at that.
We can, but that ultimately be a council call. The concept is the letter of credit is set at 120% of the estimated cost of village staff time and equipment. That 20% is just a buffer in case we have unexpected costs that are beyond the scope of the planned event. So it's really a protection for the village, and staff recommends 120%. That seems to be working, but ultimately it's up to the discretion of the council.
Could we get some information on how close they've come in the previous, I mean, they've done this 3 years?
Yes.
To find out how close they came to that? And if the whole idea, I mean, they're well established, they've done this, they're a great organization, our community do so much for the community and giving back. I mean, I know that there's a cost associated with that, and without talking about that publicly up here, if there's a way we can help reduce that for them, maybe 110%, I don't know. I think it would just be something that we could do. I mean, we have a working relationship, and people I see in the audience are the same ones that have been here for the last 3 years presenting this. So it's my 2 cents, so I'm not making a motion, I'm just asking.
We'll provide that information.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Durkin is getting at is similar to some projects where we know our contractors very, very well, and so instead of a 10% contingency, we can have something smaller because we know so well through a long series of performance that they can meet those tighter numbers. If that data would support that, that would be a similar concept, I think, that would make some sense, but obviously it's a data-driven decision.
Sure.
So we'd have to see what information.
I do think staff reduced what the fee was for them. I could be incorrect on that.
Yeah, we continue to work cooperatively with the Rotary Club, and we get better and better at streamlining or leaning the whole approach to how we operate the village side of this from our support services. So we are getting better on both sides at keeping the cost down.
Commissioner Schnell?
Even if the letter of credit was reduced, if for some reason expenses went up, they would still be liable for those expenses. We just wouldn't have a letter of credit that would cover it.
Yes.
So,
That's
I mean,
correct.
as everyone said, they've been in the community forever. It's
And-
not
and-
like.
and we
they're
know where
not
you all
members.
live.
Yes.
We know where you live.
Fair enough. Other questions? Other questions from the council? I'm in favor of this for a number of reasons. Number one, the village used to be the principal force behind a festival that happened the last weekend of June called Heritage Festival. And several years ago stopped doing that, and fortunately for the community and for us, private organization, not-for-profit organization, picked up the baton quite capably and brought us with the event which is now known as the Rotary Grow Fest. And so that's an overall good thing, and I think that we've really appreciated the fact that that's happened. And to the extent that we like to see things like that continue, then I think it is incumbent upon us to do what we can within reason to facilitate the success of such events. If the village doesn't want to be in the business of running them, we ought to do what we can to actually inspire and facilitate the success of the organizations that do want to do that. So within reason, where it makes sense, like here, I think we should try to do this. And it also helps the Rotary, as was mentioned, by allowing them, like the village does, enter into multi-year contracts and achieve the savings that go along with that. It also brings some continuity, some certainty to the community. You can plan around things. I know booking the acts, especially the entertainment, there's a very long lead time, and so this helps a great deal with that. And the community can start to look forward in advance, which helps attendance. There's a lot of different positives that come off of this. So I'm in favor of it in that respect, but then also we still maintain our ability to review this on an annual basis, generally speaking from the Community Events Commission, but also importantly from the liquor service perspective. The Liquor Commission and the Liquor Commissioner, also happens to be me, gets an opportunity, and we'll have an opportunity to review this on an annual basis. So should there be any issues, and there haven't been, but should there be any issues, there will be an opportunity to do something about it in a shorter period than 3 years. And so the performance will be reviewed annually, just like it always has been, regardless of whether it was Heritage Festival or it's Growth Fest. So I think this is a very good idea, and to the extent that we can explore other creative ideas that will grow and help support a event in our community that everyone supports and thinks is a good thing to do, I think we got to continue to do so. And finally, just one last very important comment, and that is there are in fact 199 days left until the 2013 Rotary Growth Fest.
We need to go then.
Yeah, you got a lot of work to do. Get out of here. Well, actually, next week we vote on it, so.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, please.
The next 3 items have to do with management of the village's urban forest and our parkway trees. They are all 3 contracts related to maintenance of parkway trees. And here to present information on these 3 items is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have 3 items to present tonight for our forestry contracts for the year 2013. The first is a 3-year contract for tree and stump removal, which will be our second 3-year contract for these services. The motion is to request it to authorize award of a 3-year contract for tree and stump removal services to D. Ryan Tree and Landscape of DeKalb, Illinois, in the amount of $347,400, which with an average cost of $115,800 per year. The purpose of this contract is for the removal of trees and stumps from village rights-of-way and village properties, which are necessary because of tree death, hazardous conditions, infectious diseases such as Dutch elm disease, and then we need to reduce the ash tree population from the emerald ash borer infestation. We did advertise for a bid and received 7 bidders. D. Ryan Tree and Landscape was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. All their municipal references were positive. They did contract work for the village in 2009, which was also positive, and our evaluation was included in the packet. They also assisted with the cleanup efforts in 2011 from the storm. And I'm happy to report that the 3-year contract, all 3 years, are lower than the last 3 years, which were also historically low from the prices we'd received before. So it is a very competitive price, and staff does recommend approval of the contract to D. Ryan. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments on any 3 of these items? Or are we going to take them all together?
We can present a little more background information and take them all together.
Or you have a question now?
No, not on stump removal, no.
Okay, I'll go
Let's
ahead.
present all three, and then we can have all our tree-related comments at once.
The second contract is very similar. It's also a 3-year contract. It's also very lower price than we had received in our 3-year contract in the 3 preceding years. It's requested to authorize a contract for Parkway tree pruning services to D. Ryan as well of DeKalb, Illinois, in the amount of $303,090 for an average cost of $101,030 per year. This is the village's 5-year tree pruning cycle. We go out throughout the village and prune all the parkway trees. This improves the structure of the trees. It increases resident satisfaction with the look of the trees. It also enhances the tree's health, and it also reduces wind damage. So when we have those high wind conditions, we get a lot less complaints about limbs down, and it's a much safer situation. Because of this cycle we maintain, I believe we get better prices because it's a more predictable condition and there's less pruning to be done each time they come through town. We did advertise for bids again. We received 7 bids, and D. Ryan was again the lowest responsive bidder. They had all positive references. In this case, they were the contractor for our last 3 years, and we did have very satisfactory service with them on this contract for the last 3 years, and we recommend award of this contract to them as well. The third item is our tree planting arrangements for 2013 with the Suburban Tree Consortium, which is we have worked with since the year 1987 to purchase municipal parkway trees. We are presenting a resolution to continue the village's participation with the Suburban Tree Consortium and to authorize tree supply and planting services in the amount of $120,000, which is the amount included in the 2013 budget for this work. The village obtains tree supply and planting services through the consortium, and through this we are able to provide a consistent supply of quality trees of the species that the village desires and that residents desire as well. These are trees that are not the run-of-the-mill trees you find at the local nurseries, but they're a little bit more variety in the species, and they give us a little bit more resilience against disease and be able to provide a little bit more variety for people in their parkways. We are projecting to plant a total of 375 new and replacement parkway trees in the spring and the fall of next year, which the majority of those are to replace parkway trees that are lost due to death and disease. We will be planting a small amount of new trees where people request them in parkways where there's room for them, and our forester works with residents who are requesting new parkway trees. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of these contracts.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from the audience with respect to any of the 3 tree-related items, B, C, and D, under item 8? Either stump removal, pruning services, or participation in the Suburban Tree Consortium and purchases planned for fiscal year 2013, which includes 375 new trees. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, commissioners, staff. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Meadow. And I had a couple of questions about the membership in the tree consortium. The Suburban Tree Consortium is a very good project, and I'm very pleased that the village is continuing its membership. And my questions are more in terms of the number of trees that are planned, and I'm looking now at both the information that was provided for this meeting in the summary of 5-year number of trees from 2008 through 2013, and the amounts of money that are either have been spent or are planned to be spent on that. And I'm comparing it with a similar background document that was furnished to the council in January 10th this year, 2012, in connection with Resolution 04760, also about the Suburban Tree Consortium. In particular, I am asking why the original resolution that was passed in January this year had expected to spend $163,200 for 450 trees, and the actual listed in the background information for today's resolution is 388 trees planted at an expenditure of $128,568.75. So a fairly considerable reduction in the number of trees planted this year as compared to the number that we expected to plant in January. Furthermore, the actual planned for this coming year, 2013, is 375 trees, which is both a reduction on the number of trees that were planted during the current year, 388, and a substantial decrease in the number of, compared to the number of trees that were planned to be planted this year, 450. So I think I'm very pleased with the way the village had been coming out of the decline in tree planting that was necessitated by the financial difficulties of 2008 and following years. In trying to deal with the emerald ash borer problems and the storms that we've had that have been very destructive of trees. And I'm hopeful that the village is keeping this as a high priority expenditure as the village financial situation improves. And I find these numbers and the comparisons that I make between the proposal at this time and the proposal that was made last January troubling, and I'd like to find out what the staff says about why we are moving in the direction of decreasing the number of trees planted over what we had planned to do in January this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman, and I was trying to pull up the resolution that you referenced, but couldn't pull it up fast enough.
Well, it's in the
I have it, Mayor.
archives of the, that's online, and I could...
my hand's on it fast enough, but I'm sure...
I can leave my computer here with those pages on display if the staff wants to refer to them in answering the
They probably already
question.
have it. I think Ms. Newland has a comment she wants to add right behind you.
The biggest impact to our costs is the application of prevailing wage. Unlike tree and stump removal and pruning, which are not prevailing wage items, the Department of Labor has been interpreting tree planting as a prevailing wage item, so that does increase our costs for planting. We do have some available funding through our fine section of it that we're in private development side of it. So we believe we're going to be able to plant and replace more trees than just from this contract with some additional money we have. So I think we'll be able to work to keep our levels higher. We just wanted to come in with this amount within our budget this year and then see what we can do at the fall planting with our additional money that we have available. But that's been our biggest challenge, is the increased prices from prevailing wage.
And we'll get a report on the difference between what was planned in 2012 and actually planted in 2012 from Dr. Goodman and the council.
So those are changes in costs due to changes in legislation that took place.
It's not that the legislation says changes, that the interpretation of the rules by the Department of Labor has affected the prices.
I think Dr. Goodman is pointing out that we have a different number in what we said we would spend in 2012, a number of trees, and what we actually spent, and that's the report that we'll get to you in some detail as to why those numbers are different, what causes those.
Thank you.
And it's not only the number of trees that are different, but the planned expenditure for 2012 was $163,200. The actual which is listed in the report you have today, is $128,500 and some dollars. So that's a very substantial reduction in the amount that was spent for the program, as well as for the materials in the program. It may be that you had to divert some money into prevailing wages or something else, but certainly the material expenditures are substantially less than you had in the planned document you approved. And so I think it's not only the number, but also the reduction in amount spent on tree materials that I'm interested in hearing about.
Sure, understood. I think it's a fair question, and we'll get a breakdown of what the differences are between what we had planned and what actually happened, and what were the driving forces behind that. It sounds like there was at least part of it was increase in costs. Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess to add to the number of questions, it's not just a matter of cost and the number of trees, but as we add trees, these are new trees, they're smaller, and I think in the past, I think Mr. Schofield has asked for a report on the general tree canopy. You know, how many of the older trees, the thickness of the trees. I mean, if you go to a new developments or towns, newly built towns, they may have a lot of trees, but the tree canopy isn't there. So maybe if in addition to cost and the number of trees, maybe we could add to that some idea of the health expansion of the entire tree canopy, maybe based on width of trees or something like that.
We prepare that report annually, and we will get that information to you.
Good. But more importantly, that information is only useful if you're doing something with it. Measuring something is only helpful if you're going to compare it to something else. So we would also have to have some context to what that means. Well, even previous years may not mean anything. There might be some sort of a best practice or a preferred standard that, how do you know whether you can go out there and run a race and think you ran really fast, but unless you know what the world record is, it doesn't really mean much. Commissioner Schnell?
I'm thinking of you running the 5K races, sorry.
Well, that's certainly not a world record. Right there.
Do we know, Nan, how close this is coming to actually replacing the trees that have been damaged and diseased in the community? Are we close to replacing all those that are we taking out and meeting the Crest residents, or is there a huge gap?
We have been replacing the trees we've been removing, and we've actually had some residents request some additional brand-new trees in this last year.
But are we then even with that, so there aren't a lot of, similar to, sidewalk replacement, sometimes we can do all that we're asked to do and sometimes we can't. Are we, with the dollars that are budgeted, are we able to do everything that you need to do to keep the canopy where it is?
At this point, we're even.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Dr. Goodman, I didn't want to cut you off. I don't know if you were finished.
I just had a follow-up comment that, yes, the issues that I was raising were purely numerical and comparisons, and as it's been pointed out by the council, this is less significant than the actual effect on the tree canopy in the village. And what I was aiming at was trying to get a recommitment of the council that this is a very high priority to the village. I recall when we went around and talked about creating new TCD, new total community development plan, and we asked people what were the most important features of Downers Grove, what do you really value. Every time tree cover seemed to come out very high, and so the council has given that a lot of attention in the past. That's why the number of trees was going up, even though the economic pressure on the village was very great in those last few years. And so this turnaround that I see in the numbers that are presented today is something that makes me worry about the priority that the village government is giving to the tree canopy. And so these numbers are just indications of what is likely to occur. What we're mainly interested in is continued high priority and good tree cover in the village. And several of the points that have been made by the council, both the size, relative size of replacement trees and those which have been removed, are very significant, and you don't get that from just looking at the numbers of dollars spent and the numbers of trees planted. So it is, as the manager said, important to follow with some more detailed information about what is actually achieved by the tree planting program in terms of the tree canopy. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think there's been any lessening of prioritization of the issue. While you were speaking, I was looking at the village logo right there, and front and center is a tree. It's obviously integral and very important to the community, and as you pointed out, the Downers Grove has been a member of Tree City USA for the last 28 years. And again, the numbers, people can play all kinds of games with numbers, but 2013, we're planting 375 trees being planted, where in 2008, there were only 239. If you just looked at that, it looks like we're doing gangbusters better than back then, but that doesn't really mean anything unless you have established a goal or a target, and then you measure how good you're achieving against that goal and that target. We can get all that information.
In the meantime, I would encourage people to look on our website. We have a report called the Urban Forestry and Municipal Landscape Manual that is published every year and provides answers to most, if not all, of the questions we've been talking about. It's been published every year for decades.
It's much more fun to talk about it in
yes,
the abstract
here.
here.
It's right here.
To actually go get the
that
facts.
is the report we will be providing to you. So.
Thank you. Well, any other questions or comments from the audience? We were still there. No more tree-related questions. Tree-related questions from members of the council that haven't already been asked. Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Got a couple. Give Dan a second to come back. Before Dan gets back up there, I think it probably is fair to say, or at least I'll speak for myself, I don't think that there's been any reduction in the prioritization of trees in Downers. I was actually looking into this a few weeks ago when I was driving around and we were planting the trees. And so for some perspective, since 1989, we've planted about 9,000 trees. I don't know what the math works out to, but I suspect that's somewhere around $1 million. And as Nan indicated when Commissioner Snell asked the question, we are, in addition, we're trying to keep up with what Mother Nature may do to us and disease might do to us as well. So, you know, you can look at any, I suppose, narrow snapshot of years, but in the last 5 years, as referenced, that number projected for 2013 is the second highest of all those years. It's a continuation of a solid commitment the whole village has to trees, to be sure. I had a couple questions about the other two contracts. And I don't necessarily need answers this moment on these, but one is I'd like some reaction or some commentary, if you have any, on the differentials in the bids we got. They were kind of astronomical. They were just huge. They were way larger than I expected. And I don't know if that's because we're using, DeKalb labor rather than Cook County labor. I don't know if that's because some people want the work and some people don't, but the differential was just bigger than I'm used to seeing. So I'd love to hear some more about thoughts on that. And then also on the two non-consortiums, are those sort of budget estimates that are designed to operate as kind of a not to exceed from an operational standpoint? Is that what we're shooting for? I mean, I assume that if we had to have a few more or a few less, we'd do that.
Yes, we do.
That's the purpose of those?
Mm-hmm.
So another piece of information then that I'd be interested in is how over the last, say, 3 to 5 years we've performed versus our estimate.
Okay.
That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell?
Two questions or comments. One, we are on the 5-year tree trimming cycle.
Yes.
So that's really hard to say. And just a compliment, I guess, to Ryan. They've been doing it now for, 3 years? And we've had very few complaints. And I can remember years when we had people at council meetings yelling and screaming about how trees were trimmed and how bad they looked, and, the whole gamut of how unhappy residents were with what was being done to their trees. And we haven't had complaints like that at all with Ryan. So I think that says something about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and they're actually looking at what Castine is telling them to do and actually doing what she has requested. So I think that's extremely important. And I know I had a question very similar to Commissioner Barnett's about the the differential between Ryan and the other bidders, because there is a huge, I agree with Commissioner Martin, that there's a huge difference. And I guess staff had mentioned that one of the reasons being that they know the village and they feel confident in our abilities, so.
Well, I think especially in the case of the pruning contract, they just completed the work the last 3 years. They're very familiar with the village. They're very familiar with our tree stock. They know the work. They can, really fine-tune their costs because of that. And I think they just really wanted to continue that work. They find it's cost-effective for them, and I think they really wanted to continue to have that contract. It could also be that they're planning to do adjacent resident communities. Sometimes they get a lot of resident work from that as well when they're working through neighborhoods. They can also work for residents. They probably have know economically how much other additional work that'll translate to. So I think there's a number of factors as to why that's good, makes good business sense for them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from Council? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, just a quick one. I just want to point out there's some background information, kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Schnell had stated. The optimum tree pruning cycle is to have each parkway tree pruned once in 5 years. And I think this is an important fact. Since fiscal year 07, the village has been implementing a 5-year tree pruning cycle. Prior to that, the village had been operating on an 8-year cycle. So I think if you look back, you can see, because we're on that 5-year cycle and we're doing it continuously as we should be doing, in my opinion, there's less tree pruning, and I think that's another reason you're seeing the cost of the tree pruning come down, because they're not spending as much time trimming the tree. If you think about it, every 8 years versus 5 years, because according to this map, they're already coming back into the area where I reside at. So, I mean, that just shows a proactive approach. In regards to the contract price, is there any way that we could lock that in for a 5-year deal and have one complete cycle versus a 3-year cycle?
Our purchasing policy, 3 years.
We can go up to 3 years per our policy. We can also go beyond the policy with the vote of the council. I think a change at this point would be substantial enough to cause a rebidding of that contract.
One tree provider was $781,000, and Mr. Ryan Tree and Landscape was $103,000. So it just, I agree with my colleagues. That's interesting, but whatever. I'm one who believes that if we can take advantage of these low costs, let's do it now. But back to the comment. Oh, never mind. I was going to talk about a LEAF program since you brought up the trees. So it's almost the end of the year, so.
Other questions or comments from the council on trees? Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fieldman. That brings us to item 9, the mayor's report. I have no mayor's report tonight. That brings us to item 10, manager's report.
We do have a manager's report this evening. Earlier tonight, the council talked about monitoring capital projects that are of interest to the community, and tonight we're going to do just that. There's been a little bit of discussion and attention on the grocery project, so I'd like our Public Works Director, Nan Newland, to talk about that project as it has reached substantial completion this week.
To see some more of me tonight.
Welcome back.
Last week, I'm happy to report that we substantially completed the Grove Street project and reopened it to traffic. While it might look like just a pretty new street project, there's actually 4 or 5 projects combined into one project here that I'd like to give you a little summary about. In the next slide, you can see that this is the project area here from Grove, on Grove, from Main Street to Carpenter. It's right on the edge of the downtown area.
So your canopy.
The next slide shows the condition of the street before we started this project. This was an old brick street that had been overlaid with asphalt at some point in time. Because of its closeness to downtown, it gets a fair amount of traffic, as well as a good volume of parking along this street also. This next project shows the general design of the work that we did. It shows that we kept the same street widths and parking areas and replace the curb and gutter in the same locations as they were prior to the project. The only exception is shown here on this next slide, which is at the intersection of Carpenter and Grove, where we narrowed Carpenter Street at the intersection to help slow down traffic and reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. This is a fairly heavily utilized crossing for pedestrians. There's a parking lot just to the west there. Residents from the west side of Carpenter and Denburn Woods regularly cross here. And so we significantly narrowed the crossing distance they have here. And just from driver perception, we narrowed the lane width so that they have a tendency to slow down and notice that it's getting narrowed and slow down as they go through there. To help further reduce that speed, we also extended the pavers that you see out there on Grove through the intersection. So when you cross on Carpenter now, you feel that difference in the pavement, and that helps to further reduce the speed as they come through here. So that's the traffic calming in addition to the pavement reconstruction. In addition to reconstructing the street, we were also to incorporate some water quality enhancements. From a stormwater perspective, the downtown, our downtown is unique in a couple of ways compared to other areas of the village. Over 90% of our downtown is impervious surface, which is concrete, asphalt, buildings, sidewalks. We really have very little green space in the downtown to absorb water and to filter water, rainwater as it comes down. This runoff drains directly into St. Joseph's Creek, which is enclosed in an 11-foot diameter storm sewer through the downtown. This discharge is just right at Carpenter, just on the west side of Carpenter, north of Grove. And the Salt Creek Watershed Group, which we're a member of, identified St. Joseph's Creek as a high priority for improving the quality of that water. To achieve this improvement in water quality and to comply with the village's NPDES permit, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit that we have, last year we developed strategies for improving water quality in the downtown because of these challenges, all the impervious area, all the pollutants that are run off into this large pipe that goes into St. Joseph's Creek. And we included funds in the CIP not only this year, but in all of the following years to implement these strategies in the downtown. Because of the proximity of the Grove Street project, this initiative to improve water quality in the downtown, this was a great location to implement these water improvement strategies with this project. So we've got street reconstruction, we've got traffic calming, and we've got water quality now. We were able to implement 3 major best management practices, we like to call them, or strategies to improve water quality. The first one is shown on the next slide, which is the most obvious one. That's the permeable pavers you see out there. We start at the bottom of this cross-section with large open graded stone. It works its way up to a sub-base, and on top of that, finer stone, which is the bedding course that these pavers rest on, which you can see on the top. On the next slide, you'll show a photo of these pavers being installed. This was just a couple of weeks ago. This was on the west end of the project. And on the next slide, we just give a list of the benefits of this approach. Unlike traditional impervious pavement, the permeable pavers reduce runoff. They also trap impurities from the surface as they make their way through the stone. As I said before, they have a traffic calming effect, and they also have a life cycle cost savings because unlike typical asphalt, which we will go through a maintenance cycle, they have less maintenance required of them, similar to the brick streets that we have in town. The next slide shows the 2 other BMPs, or best management practices for stormwater, we have incorporated in the project that are there that aren't as visible as the pavers. The first one is the diagram. I'm sorry, but if you could flip to the next slide, there it is. That's called a vortex separator that's underground in one of the storm sewers. It's a mechanical structure that captures the water, swirls it around, and separates the heavier metals and the suspended solids, and they settle down at the bottom, which we can come and clean out with our Vactor. So that helps to kind of take that water, those impurities out of the system there. If you go back to the slide before, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong order. This is a picture of a rain garden, which we are going to be planting in the spring. We have a couple areas in the project that are designated for this. We're looking to do a few more in the downtown as well, but this was an ideal location as we were building this project. So you will be seeing that type of planting going in the spring as well. The last slide shows a completed section. It's all been completed since this photo was taken, which is now open to traffic. It's not 100% complete. We are working on completing some restoration. We will be reinstalling signage for parking and traffic direction out here, as well as striping. We'll be completing restoration and planting in the rain gardens in the spring, as I said. I'd say the last benefit is to this project, in addition to the one I already talked about, is already taking effect, which is it's becoming a nice demonstration for people. We've had interest from commercial properties as well as residents who would like to install pavers like this for their driveways or for alleyways, to improve alleyways where they share access with their neighbors. So we have a number of residents who are very interested in this product and have been talking to us about what the cost would be for them to do similar projects. So that's an overview of the project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. We appreciate the presentation. First of all, we always like to hear from you, because usually you're talking about either building things or fixing things, which is always nice to hear about. And this project in particular was very high profile because of where it's located, and also because it, I don't know, went on a little bit longer than was originally planned, through no fault of ours. But I think is looking really nice now that it's a completion. So there have been a lot of questions about the project, both as it impacts Carpenter and Grove Street. So I thought it was appropriate that we, even in advance of our year-end wrap-up of various capital projects, explain to everyone what was involved in it. I guess was once said by a famous cartoon character, "It's not your average bear." Questions or comments from the council with respect to Grove Street? Commissioner Durkin?
Yep. What is the actual life expectancy of the street? I know when we talked about the brick streets that we redid, was a couple years ago, we got a report that it was approximately a 100-year street. What do you anticipate this being?
We would anticipate it to be very similar to a brick street.
So 80 to 100 years?
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity, I think it was Friday, right, Dave? Friday,
Yes. Yes.
Friday afternoon. I saw those guys. That picture you showed of that machine doesn't do justice. Those things are like tops, running around and moving those pallets of bricks, and I couldn't believe my eyes what I saw, how fast they were going. I mean, I know that this costs a heck of a lot more money than a regular street, but it was just amazing. It's too bad we couldn't find, especially with a life expectancy, where we could implement more of these streets, you know, based on the dollar amount, though. The one picture you showed, and I know we've talked about it, and it's really a presentation more so during our budget talks, that picture of the street condition, what was the street condition on that matrix that you have put together? What would, I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'll look that up for you. I thought about that as I was putting this presentation together. I meant to go back and look that up on the report, and I didn't.
I did. It showed up as failed.
Okay.
And then we have 4 levels, and that's the last, right? No.
There's about 10 levels, I think, and this was in the bottom 3 categories. Portions of this were in the very last category.
And it was patched. You can see the patches there.
Well, it's also been, what do you call it, glued or tarred or whatever, seal coat or cracked.
They actually had to create a new category. It was beyond F. It was
Glued,
the next
yeah,
one.
glued,
G.
yeah, G, yeah, there you go. I think it's remarkable. It'd be really interesting to see how it plays and how it progresses over the time period, so.
Commissioner Schnell and Commissioner Newstead.
Just 2 comments. One, I think we were darn lucky with the weather. And on behalf of the residents, I really want to thank the powers that be that we did not get snow, because it's a beautiful project and it looks great, but it could have been a disaster if we had gotten heavy snow. So thank you for finishing it before the snow falls, and I guess let it snow now, but we were lucky. We were darn lucky. And it wasn't our fault that it was delayed, but we were still very, very lucky that it got finished on time. The question I do have, I don't know whether it's Dan or Dave, if a resident came by and saw this and said, I think it's a great idea, I'd like to do my driveway, would this allow for credits under the stormwater utility, this type of a driveway?
Yes.
Okay, so again, it's a way, I think, for the residents, if they like the design, like the way it looks, that it's a way that they could get some credits back on the stormwater utility fee.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Commissioner Newstat?
Minus the delay for the soil stuff, did it pretty much go as scheduled and kind of follow the timeline that we had expected it to go?
Yes, it did. I'd say the only minor change was that we had hoped to phase it a little bit more. We had wanted them to come in and do Carpenter and then do the west half of Grove and then do the east half of Grove. The contractor, it's kind of a moving operation. They had been in Iowa. The people that actually lay the pavers, it's kind of a specialty crew. They came in and just went through the whole project at one time. So that was really kind of the learning curve for us and how those pavers work.
But as far as the base and getting everything down, that's kind of a normal.
As far as everything else,
different materials and different layers, but still the same kind of process.
The rest of it was all the same and followed the same schedule.
And to Commissioner Schnell's point, and we were hearing people are interested in it, might be a good opportunity to have a permanent QR code type situation out there, if we don't already, for those improvements and what's really happening with the Vortex machine and all that. So, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further? No? Thank
That
you
ends
very
our
much.
report tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, appreciate that. That brings us to item 11, Attorney's Report.
Thank you, Mayor. 4 items to present this evening. First is ordinances abating a portion of the 2012 tax levy related to the general obligation bonds, Series 2005, 2007, 2008A, 2008B, 2009, 2010, 2010B, and Series 2012. An ordinance for the levying of taxes for fiscal year commencing on the first day of January 2012 and ending on the 31st day of December 2012 for the Village of Downers Grove Special Service Area Number 2, which is the downtown service area. An ordinance for the levying of taxes for the fiscal year commencing on the first day of January 2012 and ending on the 31st day of December 2012 for the Village of Downers Grove Special Service Area Number 4, and the 2012 aggregate tax levy ordinance. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Petrarca. That ends the Attorney's Report and brings us to item 12 on our agenda, Councilmember reports and new business. As customary, we'll start with new business, and we have some new business tonight.
Would you like me to start? Okay.
And I believe it's Commissioner, I was just waiting for the cue there, but I believe that Commissioner Rankin is going to be introducing this tonight. So Commissioner Rankin, you have the floor.
You guys all received information from Manager Fieldman about some of the parts of my request. I'd just like you all to consider allowing a discussion on a future agenda to modify our current chicken ordinance. The ordinance that we have allows Downers Grove residents to have chickens on their property. I think since this ordinance was created in 1987, that there's been a movement towards sustainability, growing your own food and controlling your food source, and the trend continues to grow and become more popular. The ordinance, as it's written, excludes a great deal of our residents from participating due to their lot size, and I think there may be a way to modify the ordinance to be more inclusive of our residents while still being considerate and respectful of our neighbors. So I'm not going to delve into the whole topic tonight unless my fellow colleagues want to. I just wanted to give that introduction and see if there's interest in discussing it further at another date.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as the practice goes under new business, one of the council members has introduced a topic and is basically requesting the direction from the council as to whether or not this is an item to be placed on a future active agenda a first reading agenda for discussion and presentation, at which time there would be an opportunity for questions and comments and more details, and we don't need to get into that right now. So I will just ask the rest of the council if there's an interest in putting this request, this item, on a future agenda when it's appropriate, to have a further discussion and consideration of potentially reviewing and modifying the existing ordinance we have with respect to maintaining chickens on residential properties.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to discuss it.
Start at the end. Commissioner Barnett?
I would like to see it discussed further in the future.
Okay. Commissioner Durkin?
Pass.
Commissioner Schnell?
I haven't done a lot of research and a lot of talking about chickens over the last week or so. I have serious reservations about this, and I guess I still want to hear what some of my colleagues have to say up here. But having lived through raccoons and a few other things up here, I I have reservations about what is one man's pleasure and opportunity is another person's nightmare at times. And whatever we do, it needs to be balanced so that all people are considered and all people are respected. And I have some serious concerns. So I guess I'll pass too until I hear from my colleagues.
Okay, and again, all we're discussing right now is whether to have a conversation about it at a later date, at which point all the pros and cons and options, which would include making no changes, would be on the table.
But if we can, Mayor, what's the future date? I mean, we're looking at next week. I mean, are we looking at first quarter of 2013?
Well,
I won't pass. I agree with Commissioner Schnell. I'd like to hear what the others have to say that have been vocal on this.
Okay.
But I think we need to have a definition of what the time period is.
Well, and can I?
Yeah, sure.
I think we also need, we have a process to have items looked at by staff that will take more than the 4-hour rule. And we did look at this, I believe, last goals or the goal session before that, and we passed on it. My concern is that staff has a lot on their plate right now, a tremendous amount on their plate right now. And if as a council, we decide to look into this, then what is going to be put on the back burner because staff's time is going to have to be committed to this? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if staff knows the answer to that right now. But I think that, from my perspective, that's extremely important to understand, you know, what other items that we chose as collectively chose as high priority items may have to be put on the back burner in order to discuss the foul ordinance.
Those are two fair and related questions in terms of when we would revisit this or when this would be on the agenda items. Obviously goes hand in hand with what's involved in preparing to have it properly presented. My understanding is that, well, I won't presume anything. I guess I'll throw the question back for the village manager. How much effort do you think is involved in actually getting this for discussion on the agenda item? I've gotten the impression there's an awful lot of information that's already out there.
Yes.
Not a whole lot of research that's got to be done by
our
staff.
Our challenge is gathering that research just based on informal conversations with individual council members. The items that are requested and the research requested varies greatly from each council member, and there's a lot of information out there. So our challenge isn't doing the research, our challenge is sorting through that research that has already been done. We would like to hear from the council tonight as far as direction. I think the earliest we could get it on for a first reading is probably December 18th. However, we would like the opportunity to better understand the types of changes, the magnitudes of change that might be considered, and that will dictate the process going forward. Generally speaking, minor changes to the existing ordinance is a shorter time frame. Larger changes require more staff research, arguably more public input, and probably a more elongated policy discussion. So a lot of this is dictated after the first reading, when we start to get direction from council. These are a question of community values, and these types of discussions tend to take a lot of time once they get going.
Okay, fair enough, and I, again, don't think that necessarily there would be a date certain for a end-of-the-world, all-in, all-out type of decision. It may be just the first time it's discussed, and whether or not there's a resolution or determination that time remains to be seen. But anyway, we're still talking about whether or not we're going to talk about this, so Commissioner Waldeck hasn't had a chance to weigh in yet.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly will.
Of that, I have no doubt.
Do we have time?
No, so a couple of months ago, I suggested that we look into, for example, the homeless situation and the problem and some of the things. And the response to that was, well, staff is too busy. We don't have a budget. We need to wait for the financial planning process. And if anything is going to take a lot of staff time, and the time I spent researching this and the number of ordinances and zoning and all these questions that are out there, including gauging public opinion on this, is phenomenal. I mean, I can't see this happening by December 18th. I question our priorities when we take a more serious situation, and we don't have time for that. But yet, in 2 weeks, we can come up with with green sheets, re-sheets. You know, I wondered about that. I did take the 2 weeks we had, though, and I did do a lot of research. And, you know, what has really changed since 1987? Nothing. If chickens were healthy then, they're healthy now. I mean, if they're dirty then, they're dirty now. You know, it's kind of, the only thing that's really changed is popularity. And you know, are we going to change our speed limits just because street riding and drag racing is more popular? It's a matter of popularity, and I don't see changing the codes or reviewing this whole situation over something that was carefully decided and considered back in 1987. And I know you don't want to get into details tonight, but I've gone through probably hundreds of websites. I got 60 that I saved. I got a whole bunch of material here. I mean, I'm ready to discuss it tonight, and I just don't see moving forward with this at all. Thanks.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to some of Commissioner Waldeck's points, you know, this is not anywhere near like the new business item that was brought up about homelessness in our village. We already have an existing ordinance for keeping of fowl in the village of Downers Grove. As our process dictates, when there is majority of support for continuance of the discussion, that's what we do. Commissioner Waldeck went through his process. There wasn't support. We're at this process now. We'll see if there's support tonight. From my perspective, I think that all the items outlined in the actual new business item are interesting and things that we should be looking at, but I think they can be accomplished quickly because we do already have the existing ordinance. We have a lot of the rules and regulations already in place. I think the paragraph in our information here that says Commissioner Rankin would like to discuss increasing the number of chickens permitted, decreasing setback requirements, banning roosters, and requiring license or permit for keeping chickens is a good snippet to start with amending the existing ordinance. It's not rechanging, it's not changing the whole ordinance. It's looking at some of the things that are causing some of the enforcement cases that are pending right now. So I'm in favor of discussing this issue further. And I think that when we compare new business items, we have to be very careful to make sure that we're comparing apples and apples, and this is not the same issue that Commissioner Waldeck tried to compare it to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. And picking up on that, I agree this is very different. It's not a fair comparison with all due respect because there is an existing ordinance, Chapter 5, Animals and Fowl, which actually goes through a great amount of detail as to what the current ordinance is. So part of the problem we had when a sort of a vague issue was brought about how do we address the quote-unquote homeless issue was, well, what is that? And we don't have a homeless ordinance that someone is talking about limiting the number of homeless people we can have or where they can be or what setbacks are. It's completely different. We're talking about an ordinance that currently exists, and there's very specific requests to look at things that are very specific, such as setbacks and number that can be kept. And whether it's changed or not is another story, but the request to look at something is very specific and well-defined in that regard. And again, whether it changes or not is a whole other discussion that we have yet to have, but that's very specific. And the question about the amount of time and resources put into it is a fair one, which I think was answered about as well as Manager Fieldman can. And I think the question is we'll have to start talking about it to really find out. And it may be that it becomes too much and maybe that's it. Maybe it's not a big deal and it can be easily resolved. I don't think we know yet, and this is under new business, so as a procedural point, we're not having that conversation yet. The only question is whether there's at least a majority of the council that is interested in having this put on an agenda for a discussion of what I understand to be very specific points within the framework of an existing ordinance. So I don't view it as all that complicated. There may be differences of opinion on it, but there always are. But it's well defined is where I draw the difference, where I think the issue that was previously proposed wasn't so much about homelessness, but it was about limiting sales of certain cans of alcohol at certain facilities within the village, which was, I thought, unrelated to the problem. So I think there's a disconnect there between those two issues. Furthermore, in all due respect, I mean, I recall very distinctly this being brought up about a year ago, and at that point in time, there wasn't majority support to look at it any further. So sometimes things get support, and sometimes they don't. It happens to all of us.
Well, if I may.
Well, I wasn't finished. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, from my perspective, this is rather straightforward. There's requests to put something on an agenda for discussion. I think it's very specific, it's well-defined, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to take that much time. If it does, I'm reserved the right to change my mind, but right now, I'm willing to at least put it on the agenda for discussion, and we'll go from there. But, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, to clarify, I'm not comparing the chickens to the homelessness, but the arguments against it were identical. It's, there's no budget for it, there's no, lack of time and so forth, and...
I disagree. I don't think...
The time to put in, the time I put into this issue already has already surpassed the original suggestion.
Right, but that was your personal investment in it. That's not a staff investment, which is a different story. And I do disagree with the characterization that there was a statement, there's no budget to look at a homelessness issue. I remember very clearly, because I raised the same question then, I'm raising now, is what is that? And I yet have an answer as to what it is. So it's very hard for me to put something on the agenda that is undefined and candidly means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, where this is extremely specific, in my opinion. We're talking about whether a setback should be 50 or 25 or 30. I mean, you're down to the feet. And whether it's 3 chickens or 4 chickens, that's pretty darn specific. And the budget question only comes into play if we start finding out that this is going to take a lot of staff time and there are enforcement issues. Well, that may or may not be, but again, we already have an ordinance. We're currently enforcing an ordinance. So I haven't heard yet that there's going to be any increase need in FTEs or anything like that. Again, I reserve the right to change my mind if I hear information that makes me think otherwise, but all we're talking about right now is this something that's appropriate to put on an agenda for further discussion of precisely those types of things?
Mayor.
So I'm okay with it. We'll go back to Commissioner Rankin since she started this off, and then Commissioner Barnett.
Well, I just wanted to address, I think part of the reason that the homeless issue, your concern didn't go any further was because none of us were prepared to talk about it, and it was kind of a surprise commentary. And I think maybe if it would have followed a process, maybe it would have changed. I'm not sure about that. The question about the amount of staff time, I would agree. I wouldn't want this to create a good deal of work for the staff, but I do think it will be dictated about, if we do discuss it, that time will be dictated as to what kind of information we're requesting and what kind of things we need to hear in regards to research. I think if we decide to talk about it and it's just about adjusting things, I don't know what research we could get that would change our mind. It's either if you agree with it or if you don't. That's all I have to say. Sorry.
Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize if I was a little short at the beginning there. I was understanding the process to be a little different than the way it's sort of played out. I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit of what Commissioner Neustadt said and what the Mayor said as well, but we don't have sort of this big open-ended thing in front of us. And we have specific requests from specific residents to modify an existing ordinance that right now disallows a permitted behavior on about 75% of our parcels in the village. It's a real specific question. If we had a street drag race ordinance and we had a couple of residents asking to extend that to their streets because it didn't apply, then I would suggest we should hear that as well. But I also suggest that kind of an ordinance, just like this one, would likely be sorted out by our staff in about a half an hour's worth of time, because frankly there's a lot of this going on. There are other ordinances to draw on, there are other communities to draw on, there's a lot of online available information, there are studies by local colleges and universities on the subject matter, all of which we all have, so we all are pretty well aware that much of the research is in fact in our hands. It's a pretty straightforward question, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mayor, to speak a second time. I was not understanding the process and wanted to make sure that a few of my thoughts got into the record for the evening.
Yeah, that's fine. And in all fairness, I'm actually glad that we're utilizing the new business portion of our meetings more for this type of conversation. So we're still, I don't want to say a learning curve, but as we continue to use it, that's fine. The process will evolve. Commissioner?
Jill.
Yes, I know.
Well, maybe, I guess, I don't think it's as simplistic as it's being made out to be. At least from my perspective, it's not as simplistic as it's being made out to be. You know, changing setbacks from 50 to 20 to 10 has huge implications for a lot of people in our community. Some people, you know, want to raise chickens. There may be lots of people out there who don't want to raise chickens. And how do you weigh those two value systems, I guess is the best way of putting it. I too have, I've talked to somewhat of an expert in the field, and I've read a heck of a lot. I've read all the information the residents have sent us, and I've gone out and looked at a bunch of stuff myself. And just like with statistics and anything else, there's two sides to every story, and it's not that simple. And my concern is if we try to rush this and get it done in 2 weeks, we are going to lose, from my perspective, and I like analytical stuff and I like to analyze, but we're going to lose some of that trying to really look at what are the implications to our community, what are the implications to all our residents, not just to those who want to keep chickens. What are the implications of if the ordinance was to go through and something happens? From the research that I've done, and I've researched all over the country, I've probably spent 30 or 40 hours on this, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure which. I've learned a lot about chickens. But the bottom line is, it is not simplistic. It's not as simple as saying we're going from 50 to 40 to 30, because that has huge implications for our community and for the value systems of our residents, all our residents. And I think that's, if indeed, and it looks like it is going to at least move forward to the next discussion stage, I think that's where we need to get the information that we need, and perhaps even the Planning Commission would need, to really vet this as much as possible, so that whatever the decision ultimately is, that it's a decision that all our community can buy into, not just some people in the community. You know, it was also suggested to me that perhaps we should talk to someone over at the University of Illinois Extension Service, because they would have, I've read an article from the University of Wisconsin Extension Service on chickens and the pros and cons and problems and the pros of having them. And it was suggested that perhaps, you know, when staff gathers information, that either we could have someone come and talk to us about the pros and cons, so that we get both sides and have a clear understanding of what we're actually talking about, or at least get some information from them about the pros and cons. Because again, it's not just saying, well, 20 sounds good, or 10, or 0 lot line, we can put it in, and someone can put them any way they want. It's from my perspective, from what I've read, it's much deeper than that, and I think we all need to look at that. And I'm not saying, you know, pros or cons, it's just this information on both sides that really needs to be researched.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and again, I reserve the right to change my mind if it turns out that, like other things we've looked at over the last 10 years, they start out simple and become far more complicated, and then you have to put the brakes on. I get that, and that's a fair point. However, the thing to note here is that, again, we have an existing ordinance. As I understand it, right now, somewhere between, chickens could be kept under our existing ordinance right now, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 parcels in the village.
That's correct.
So there's already a huge potential right there, and yet I don't think we have 3,000 to 4,000 people keeping chickens. So I don't know if it is going to be this huge change. I think what it is that the question is, given, as Commissioner Rankin pointed out, and things have changed since 1987, Commissioner. Certainly my hairstyle has.
I think it needs an ordinance.
As well as my taste in music. But there is has been for some time a movement about having more control over the food sources and interest in various local initiatives in terms of raising food and whatnot, which is, I think, far more prominent than it was in 1987, certainly. That is part of this, but it is something that can be done right now. And what we're talking about is whether the current restrictions that are preventing some residents who do want to do it, obviously there's a lot right now that could, as many as 3,000 or 4,000 if they really wanted to, without even coming before us. Just do it right now. But the question is, there are some who just don't happen to live on those lots, and are the current restrictions just throw this word out, unduly arbitrarily preventing them from doing so for no good reason. And it may be that there's a lot more to it, Commissioner, you might be right, I just don't know yet. I'll go back to the point, all we're talking about is whether to talk about
No,
it.
I understand that.
But this is a healthy part of the process.
If I,
Absolutely, Commissioner, please.
just to tail off of Commissioner Schnell's comment, she's talking about a balance between the people who want to raise chickens and those who don't. And I think the real controversy here is the people who want to raise the chickens and the people who don't want the chickens next door. It's not necessarily people who don't want to raise them. They don't want them next door because, and without getting into the whole thing, they have a whole slew of reasons why they don't want chickens next door and the effects it has on their property and their quality of life. It's actually a quality of life issue. When you start getting into zoning and that, it's not just setbacks and that, it's also, you'll see out there that there's zoning districts where in some towns you have a district where you can have it and another one you can't. So it can be very complex. It's not just those who want to raise them and those who don't. It's a quality of life issue. And to me, this would be an ideal question to put on a referendum, and we got an election coming up in April, but it's probably too late for a council to put anything on a referendum at this point, I believe. Maybe that's a question that can come up too, because that might simplify the whole thing, should the council review its ordinance, because this is could be a big change to the quality of life of all residents.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't talked about it.
So that's a question I have for the village clerk, if it would be too late to put anything like that on a referendum for the April 9th. Probably is, but,
We'd have to look into that.
Dave.
okay.
I guess the question was asked was whether it was too late. Whether the merits of it, I'll address at another point in time if necessary. But again, I hear what everyone's saying, but all we're talking about is whether to talk about it and what the proposed changes would be, because it may be that it's not a big change in any quality of life, because again, there's 3,000 to 4,000 parcels right now that could start doing this regardless of what their neighbors thought. Right now. That's already there, so I don't think we're talking about that issue. That issue sailed in 1987. What we're talking about is whether it needs to be modified at all, and all we're discussing is, should it be modified, and if so, how? And we're not having that conversation here tonight. So I think the question that's on the table is, are there enough of us who wish to at least put it on an agenda for a future discussion, in which we may find out how complicated it is. And it may be too complicated, I don't know, I reserve the right to change my mind. Are there any more comments on whether or not it should be on the agenda in a future meeting? And candidly, just again, from my perspective, at least talking about it in 2 weeks doesn't seem to be unreasonable to me, because there's no obligation to have to decide anything at that time. It's a workshop item.
We normally take the last meeting off in December, and we meet the two Tuesdays in December, so.
We are planning to meet all 3 meetings in December because we will be off Christmas Day, December 25th, and Tuesday, January 1st.
We can't do that or we wouldn't meet for a month.
All right, but that would be the first time. I won't be here for the meeting, if it matters. But I support the current ordinance, so I'm in the super minority here, so.
Super minority.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, I think Sean's done the math, Mayor.
All right, well, should I cut to the chase here? Am I correct that Commissioner Rankin, Neustadt, Barnett, and myself at least favor putting this on a future agenda for a workshop discussion? Am I correct with that?
That's correct.
Everyone yes? Anyone disagree with my assessment of those who are in favor?
Just vocalize all 4?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Got it.
Did we get a yes out of Commissioner Barnett?
That's the way I started.
All right. Is there any further direction that staff requires at this point in time in terms of
No further direction.
preparing that for an agenda item?
I will start with working with Commissioner Rankin and keep the other council members informed and keep the community informed as to when this might be on an upcoming agenda. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's how new business is supposed to work.
Can I ask a question?
And besides, it keeps the meetings entertaining at the end. Otherwise,
People leave.
people leave.
Do you want information or not information? Do you want questions that perhaps other people may have? as to implications?
Absolutely, and we'll start by doing a quick perusal of the many communities that have had
No,
questions
but I'm just
asked and
saying,
answered.
other questions
Yes.
that may have been given to us by people who know something about chickens.
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
Okay, that's fine.
Chicken experts.
Well, I wouldn't do that, but chicken people.
All right, before we leave this topic, I just want to thank each and every one of my colleagues for showing tremendous restraint and not using a single pun during that entire conversation.
But you're going to come up with...
No, I'm not going to.
It's been tough.
I'm not going, don't.
I asked if I could
Don't.
bring in show and tell.
Don't.
The manager told me
Everybody was
no.
good, stay there, please. All right, council member reports, please. Start with Commissioner Barnett, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any particular report, or except that I heard a little earlier today that former Mayor Cheever had some medical challenges over the last couple of weeks and is on the mend and doing well, and I just wanted to give her a little shout out to hope that everything goes well and recovery is speedy and successful.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. I think we all agree. We hope that, wish her a speedy recovery. Commissioner Durkin.
No report.
Commissioner Schnell.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. The Gingerbread Festival and winter events are still happening in downtown Downers Grove. Lots of great specials and events happening right in our own downtown. You can check out downtowndg.org for the calendar of events, which includes a couple of stops from Santa, and then the specials that are happening in the shops downtown. So please spend your time in our beautiful downtown. Check out the decorations that have been expertly put up by our Public Works Department, and even some of the shop owners have put up some of their own decorations this year. So it's really looking great down there. That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Just a request to shop Downers Grove.
Amen. Thank you. Two things very briefly. Number one, I want to thank everyone that came out in the rather brisk weather for the annual tree lighting ceremony. That kicked off a great weekend, and Commissioner Newstead has described those festivities many times. The tree looks great. I want to thank the family again, the Danko family, for donating the tree, and everyone that contributed to the ornaments that are on it, and from our own village TV staff here for another excellent job in filming the whole thing. You always seem to make me look better than I really do, so thank you very much for whatever you do. And then last, this comes in sort of a mixed joy and sadness kind of issue. We have to congratulate Deputy Chief Jim Black, who we couldn't be happier for in his selection as the new Chief of Police up in Crystal Lake. That's the joyous part, because that's obviously a hard-earned and well-deserved accolade, and next step for him in his career. He's been a tremendous leader and contributor here in Downers Grove, and losing him will be, that's the sad part, but we wish him nothing but success, and once again, it speaks to the tremendous quality, the outstanding men and women that we have here in our own police force, that we can count yet another area police chief that came from the Downers Grove organization. So best of luck and congratulations to Jim Black. I'm sorry, future Chief Black, excuse me. And that's all I have. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Good night.